And we're rolling. Take two.
Alright, guys, so today I had the worst web developer interview ever. Like, anything that could go wrong went wrong. It was just so bad, man. I just felt so embarrassed to have this interview, and I kind of want to just share it with people because, I mean, bad interviews happen. It doesn't always go right, you know? No one's perfect, so, I mean, I'm not, like, the best people person, and when you're sitting in an interview trying to sell yourself to someone, it could get very it could get very scary. And I guess, all that scariness is built up, and I just wasn't really um, you know, I wasn't really there. So basically to start the story, I um I had this interview at this company basically 45 minutes outside of the city I was living in, or I am living in now. Can I say the city I'm living in?
Yeah.
Okay,
I
so
think you're living here.
yeah, I guess so. Um, so the company was 45 minutes outside of Pittsburgh, right? So I drove there, and I was looking pretty nice. I had my button down, had my tie, had my nice laptop already turned on. My laptop, I mean, had my laptop turned on, with my text editor already turned on, all my projects in there already ready to go. So then, I walk in the interview 15 minutes early. I was actually sitting in the parking lot for 20 minutes because I was like, fuck it, I'm ready. I'm ready for this shit. And I walk in. I talk to the receptionist. I'm like, hey, can I see Joe? I have an interview at 1 p.m. She's like, yeah, sure. She takes me to Joe, who is the software engineer, and then he takes me into like a little room, about maybe the size of this room, about three chairs on one side, three chairs on the other side, and then on the wall there's like a huge TV. So he takes me in the room. I sit down. He sits down on the other side, and then another engineer actually comes in, and he sits on the other side of the room. So we're just talking. We're just talking for a little bit. He asked me about my experience, why I got into the web development. Just like general interview questions, and then we started the what was called a code review, which is basically he gives you a snippet of code, and you go through the code and you have to figure out what it's doing exactly. And so he pulls up the code, and he pulls up, and I really didn't understand the syntax. It was actually written in C sharp, and I've never freaking seen C sharp in my entire life.
That is incorrect. I showed you C sharp.
I've seen C sharp once.
3 days
Once
ago.
for like 10 minutes. I've seen C sharp once for like 10 minutes.
I don't think it was quite 10 minutes.
Okay.
You looked at it.
Like 30 minutes, an hour.
No, like 5 minutes.
Okay, 5 minutes, whatever. I've seen it for 5 minutes. Okay, and then yeah, so I don't know C sharp, but he basically wanted to see my thought process, basically how I can look at something I've never seen before and try to figure it out. So I went through the code line by line, and I was like, oh, this section probably does this, and this section probably does this, and I mean, I guess what was really bad was I felt unsure because I mean, like, I've never seen this code before. It's written in like a different language, and I'm not a C sharp guy. I'm a JavaScript, PHP guy, and so I went through that, and he after I told him what I thought it did, he went ahead and said, hey, okay, so I'm gonna explain to you what it actually does. And I was off by a lot. Because I know that it was just like, I mean, like, some of it made sense, like, I understand like what was a function, but I couldn't understand the little methods. But anyways, to continue the story, the next part of the interview, he asked me to show him some of my projects. This is where it gets pretty bad.
So bad he has to take a sip of, I'm assuming coffee to get through it.
Yeah, it's coffee, just straight coffee. But so I pull out my laptop. It's my little laptop bag. I pull it out, put it on the desk, open it up, already turned on with my IDE already popped up. And basically, I wanted to show him the Laravel project because they were looking for someone who knew They wanted to hire someone who knows Laravel. So I figured I wanted to show him something that was related to the job description. So I pulled up the project. I started MAMP, which is like an Apache server kind of thing, and then I started that. But then the problem was the second I loaded the web page, it didn't look the way that it normally looked because I used what was called a CDN. And to use a CDN, you basically have to be connected to the internet. So the second I opened up the web page and he looked at it, it looked like a first grader drew some kind of weird drawing on it. Everything was misaligned. Like the nav bar was down where the footer was. The login was down in like the corner of the page, and it just looked so bad. And I was so embarrassed.
You might be getting around to this, but quick question: did you show him the code?
Yes. Okay. The first thing I did was actually I showed him the code, and there was a lot there, so I basically just summed it up, and I started with showing him my routes, and showing him how it connected to a controller and how that controller connected to the views, and I just basically showed him the basic functionality of how everything connected. But the worst part of it was actually showing him the project itself. Because for one thing, I used a CDN. And the second thing is, for the project to work, I had to use an API. I had to use the Yelp API, which was basically the core of the project. And because the API didn't work, it made the project not work. So I couldn't show him a functional project. So then I was like, all right, let me show you a different project. And the next project I showed him was my video game project. And basically, to sum up this project, it's basically a video game where you watch a YouTube video on the left side of the screen, and on the right side of the screen there's a map. So so you watch the video and you have to determine where that video was uploaded from, and then pick a spot on the Google Maps, or the map, which is using the Google Maps API. So I brought that project up. That project was also using the Bootstrap CDN. So everything was not being responsive. It was just all over the place. I couldn't even log in because I was using the Firebase, which is like a type of database. I couldn't even log in.
Do you know SQL?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I couldn't even log in. I couldn't even show him a video. I couldn't even pull up Google Maps because like it wasn't connected to the internet. So I couldn't use that API. And it was just a whole mess because I just couldn't show him my skills. So then I was like, all right. So I stood up, and granted at this time my laptop bag was on my lap. So this is actually the worst part of the story. My laptop bag was on my lap, and I stood up for a second, and my laptop bag fell on the ground, and all these sunflower seeds spread across all over the ground.
Oh no! Whenever you told me this story, I thought it happened in your car, not at the interview.
No, like all these sunflower seeds spread up. They were all over the ground, and then I was like, oh fuck. So me and both of the senior engineers were on the ground picking up these sunflower seeds, and I'm like, oh fuck, this is the worst interview ever. So because I'm making the senior engineer pick these sunflower seeds off the ground, put them in the trash can, and that took a good 5 to 10 minutes. And then afterwards, after we picked up the sunflower seeds and threw them in the trash can, we sat back down, and the senior engineers were like, well, do you have any questions for us? Which is a big sign of, yeah, the interview's over. So he was like, basically, I asked him a few questions, just like, what would my role be? But I knew the interview was over at that point. So, I got up, shook their hand, walked out, and I walked out with embarrassment. Worst interview in the world.
So, I think there's a few learning points from here that I want to bring up. I've been taking notes the entire time. Mind you, he told me this story earlier, but not this in depth. Okay. One, this isn't even really a talking point, but it's probably not a good idea to take food or drinks into the interview
Yes.
with you.
See, the thing is, the sunflower seeds were in my computer bag, and I guess when I picked up my computer bag, I picked it up upside down, so everything on my bag just fell on the floor, and it just happened to be the hardest thing. Like, it just happened to be sunflower seeds.
Yeah, but they didn't
Sucked.
have to be inside your bag for the
Yeah.
interview.
Yeah.
Okay, so a second thing, the reason why I asked this, showing code. Now, a lot of interviews will let you get away with not having your site working for them because they understand internet issues, they understand API and CDN issues. That's all fine and dandy. But you need to be ready to talk about your code instead of showing your website and going through like every bit and telling them, this is why I did this, this is why I did this, this is why I chose this instead of this, and stuff like that. So, also preparing for no internet, you have the CDN and API issue. Both issues that you could have fixed before you went in. The API will sound weird, but hear me out on this. So CDN is pretty obvious on how to fix. You can download the hard code and just run the code yourself. As far as the API goes, you can make a mock API of anyone else's API. It doesn't have to be for everything. You can literally just grab like the first 1,000 rows or whatever and connect that API up into your project.
Yeah, but the only issue was a Google Maps API can't really be recreated.
Oh, so you were running it for Google Maps.
Yeah,
Okay.
but the thing is, the learning lesson is if you're showing off an application, and it requires an API or CDN, obviously ask him for the Wi-Fi password. If it's like too much of a hassle, then you have to make sure you can explain your code with confidence. Like,
a good way to dodge all of this also is setting up like a Heroku or something just so they can see your code on live site. That also pushes the understanding that you know like the basics of FTP or publishing or pushing and pulling
just
code.
pulling your website.
So it was his first interview, and I know I haven't on this channel covered my background a lot, but I've been a web developer for almost 5 years now. I'm not like the greatest, but I've definitely done my fair share of interviews, and pretty much all of them that I was actually like, you know, a good candidate for, I have got the offer for them.
Yeah, exactly.
And the entire reason is because basically I will make sure all my work is ready to a T the day before. Like, I'll be honest, I'm lazy as fuck.
Yeah.
And I probably will wait until the last minute for everything.
Yeah.
And I'm the exact same way for interviews. So, like, if I know I have an interview a week from now, 6 days from now, I'm going to set everything up for the interview. Make sure it's working with no internet. Make sure I have good talking points with my code. And not having sunflower seeds in my computer bag.
So let me explain my background a little bit, I guess. So I don't have a computer science degree. I'm more of a self-taught person who just Googles a lot. So for me to actually land these interviews and just get phone calls for jobs is very, very difficult. So I'm just pretty much on that journey that I feel like most of you guys are on too, and I'm just on that journey just to get my foot in the door and just build that experience so I can someday become a senior developer. And I know it's really hard. I mean, you this is the grind, you know, this is the hustle right now. Like, this is where I'm just working day and night, coding every single day, and just, you know, applying to jobs. So it's just like I mean, even though today was a bad interview, I mean, do you have a good thing? I mean, this is even though today was a bad interview, right? It's more of a learning lesson, you know.
Exactly.
It's my first interview, and it's basically, I mean, it's gonna be the worst interview I ever had, and I don't think I'll have any interview as bad as this one. And there's no way it could be worse than this. There's no way. The only way it could be worse than this is if my laptop explodes and it catches the whole building on fire, and then someone dies in the process, and I'm all over the news. But
no, dude.
I'm saying
More realistic situation. There is more than likely a chance for you to get a worse interview. It could be a company that didn't, or a technical recruiter. I say technical with quotes here. I love you guys. I love you technical recruiters. But sometimes you really need to be on your game with knowing what the client wants and what we can do.
Exactly.
And this has happened to me before, where a technical recruiter came up to me. He's like, "You're absolute perfect fit for this position," and stuff like that. And mind you, this is my first time kind of dealing with technical recruiters, so I was like, okay, sure, let's do this. So I go in as a person that's been developing for maybe 2 years, and all of a sudden I'm getting asked really hardcore back-end questions whenever I'm a front-end developer. Mm-hmm. This was before, as a front-end developer, I didn't even really know that much about object-oriented. I knew the basics, but they're going over that, they're going over MVC, they're going over indexing a database.
Ooh.
They're going over proper structures and schemas and everything backend you could possibly imagine. And I'm just sitting there there's no way I should have even made my through the first few interviews. The fact that the recruiter put me in this position where I'm obviously at a place I have no reason to be.
Yeah.
And that's a worse kind of interview in my eyes. I can screw up. I believe you can screw up and pretty much talk your way out of most things as long as you're actually the right person for the job. But if you go into an interview thinking you're the right person and then all of a sudden discovering they're looking for something completely different, that is heartbreaking.
Honestly, that would be really cool to do, to see if you can do it. Say a recruiter asks you, they try to get you into let's say they try to get you into Google, right? And then you sell yourself so good that you're able to get an interview with Google, even though that you know none of the technologies. That proves that you know how to sell yourself, and you know how to talk, and you know how to lie.
That only gets yourself so far, though. Yeah. One of my friends had a huge job interview at Giant Eagle. Well, I think it was last year. I'm not going to mention his name. I probably should have even said Giant Eagle, to be honest. But he talked himself up to the recruiter, talked himself up to the interviewers. On the second interviewer came the second interview came the technical parts. And if he recalls correctly, he told me he literally got one question right out of 20. And it was literally the first one.
Yeah.
And they just never stopped asking questions. Even though he's I don't know it. And they're just okay, well, what about this?
I
don't know, man.
It's can I just leave now? I think I'm in the wrong place. Let me just get out of here.
I'm pretty sure I walked into the wrong building.
Oh, dude, I thought this was Walmart. But honestly, I feel so this company that I applied for was a small business. It's a very small business. You probably never even heard of it. But I feel the best way, if you're trying to become a web developer and someday work for a huge company, I feel the best thing to do is apply at small businesses. Because if you don't get the job, then who cares? They're just a small business, I mean, I feel it would be cool to work for a huge company like Highmark or Google or Uber or Amazon. So just use these small startups as practice interviews. Apply at them, the first thing I would do is apply at companies that you don't want to work for. Apply at these companies that you don't want to work for. So when you get that job interview, treat it as a practice interview, and then start applying at companies you do want to work for. So when you get to that interview, you're prepared. You've gone to 3 or 4 interviews, and you're just oh, I know what to expect. I know what to do now. So I feel yeah.
And something else, if you're coming into web development without a degree, without any formal training, don't take it to hurt or anything, like, if you flunk your first interview. Like, I've gotten a few people that had no education whatsoever into the development job, like, different development roles, and some of them are making more money than me by now. Mind you, I have gone more relaxed with my position because I have a plan and I'm carrying it out.
Yeah.
But I ended up going from a startup, which was a fun company. The boss was kind of, cuckoo.
Yeah.
I went from that kind of situation to working for a company that on my first interview told me I needed an 8-year degree. Yeah, spoiler alert, I had a 2-year degree and I've been working there for almost 4 years now.
So Tom, I guess a lot of people always ask this question. This is a very common question I see in forums and on Reddit. So you're saying that you can get a job as a web developer without a computer science degree, or without a degree in general. Okay, so say you don't have a degree, right? How do you land that first web development job? How do you get your foot in the door? What makes a candidate strong enough to get their foot in the door?
Okay, well, I'm gonna put down my vape because it's story time! Yay, we're on the story time gif. What was that dance? Was that the chicken dance? Story time!
Oh, the gif will be somewhere.
So I basically went from the first job, which I mentioned, my boss was kind of cuckoo. I'm not saying it was a bad job. The job was great experience, and I got really deep into APIs and PHP there, and I even hacked Facebook while I was there. Hacked into their API, into things you were not originally supposed to access. My boss posted a picture from a restaurant, just posting a random sign they had, and literally a minute after he posted it, I sent him his exact GPS coordinates, the name of the street he was on, the name of the building he was in.
Interesting.
And that was a few years ago, before Facebook really committed a bunch of time into their API.
Yeah.
So after that whole experience, I kind of wanted to work for myself for a while, and I was really big into video games and card games, and I supported myself off of doing small freelance jobs, $100 there, $100 there, pretty much maybe netting $200, $300 a month, and card games. I'm really good at card games, and Yu-Gi-Oh, poker, Magic, you name it, and I supported myself literally just from going to Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments, winning, and then selling whatever I won. And I would win 4 or 5 tournaments a week, net about $350 a week from Yu-Gi-Oh. I know that sounds insane, but if you know how to do it, it honestly works. But you have to basically be able to win. You kind of have to accept that you're going to be a little bit scummy and just take out a bunch of noobs over and over again.
Of course.
But anyway, after that, I had eventually decided, you know what, it's time for me to get back into professional web development and all this stuff. I was 21 at the time. Yeah, 21, because I've been working at Cyber for almost 4 years. And it was July that I had decided to start working again. Or was it July? No, about 6 months went past. I quit in April. I remember it being hot outside whenever I decided to, but it might have been a hot, fall. But anyway, it was about 6 to 7 months before I decided to get back into, the career path. And I had decided, now this is a little bit intense and not recommended for everyone. My, big philosophy is, don't bitch out. If you're gonna do something, do it. So I was okay, I'm not eating except for fruit and alcohol, soda, and water, and I'm only leaving my room for bathroom breaks.
Yeah.
And I stayed up for literally 48 hours straight, building a portfolio, rebuilding multiple sites, and after that, I let myself sleep for probably about 14 hours straight. As soon as I woke back up, I started contacting recruiters, started looking on Indeed, started looking on Monster. Within 3 to 4 weeks after that, I had 5 job offers.
And this is before your degree?
No, this is after my degree, but this is after I got fired from a job.
So my question is so my question is, how does someone get? So a lot of people ask, how do you get your foot in the door if you don't have a degree?
Well, the thing is, like, I have an associate's degree, and pretty much every company's eyes, that literally means nothing. Like, associate degrees literally is just nothing to the professional world.
So what do you do then?
I built my portfolio. I built fake projects like, oh, I'm going to make a lava lamp selling company. And I would build a website advertising lava lamps or whatever and go through all that process. You'd build multiple fake projects, do whatever projects you can use from professional or freelance that you have worked on, and build up your portfolio. In web development, knowledge, portfolio. That is what matters.
Yes.
They're not testing you on your degree. The job I have now, like I said, required an 8-year degree just to get in the door. I know at least 3 people working there that has like 2 years or less.
Yeah.
As far as their degrees go.
So I guess like the way to get your foot in the door, it sounds so simple. It's basically just to have projects. If you can have functional projects to show off, like if you want a job as a front-end developer and you build a project using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and you can present that project and show it to the recruiter or show it to whoever, then that's gonna prove to them that you know how to use this technology, you know how to write code in this technology, and I feel like that's how you get your foot in the door.
A big thing to otherwise know that companies, especially if you're applying for a junior role, do not care about your degree, because if you come in and show that you've spent your time learning, spent your time working hard, they know you're someone they can mold to their need.
Yes.
So, like, if you come in and they need, like, a Angular 1 developer where you've been teaching yourself Angular 2, you're not going to be like, well, Angular 2 is so much better because this is this. They're going to just be like, no, get out the door if you do something like that. Yeah. But as you're a new developer, you're willing to learn. They know, like, they'll be like, hey, do you know Angular? You're like, yeah, I do. They're like, 2 or 1? You're going to be like, 2. They'll be like, okay, well, can you backpedal a bit and learn 1 for us if we were to take you on? And of course, you're going to be excited. You're like, hell yeah, I can do that. Yeah, hell yeah, give me this job, man. Yeah, and they're going to be like, okay, this is someone we can, like, make fit our needs.
Exactly. Oh yeah, so here's a little tip too. I mean, so I got a call from a recruiter one time, right? And basically, while he was talking to me on the phone, he was looking at my GitHub at the same time. And I mean, honestly, you really don't need to, because you probably don't have an amazing GitHub, do you?
No. Yeah. I like take my GitHub down and rebuild it like every 3 months. Yeah. And like it's just literally random gunk.
And honestly, like I've talked to a lot of people who do have jobs in the web development field, and a lot of them don't have amazing GitHubs. But the thing is,
if you're job searching, you probably should work on it.
If you're job searching, just make sure like there shouldn't be any reason why you don't get the offer or don't get your there shouldn't be any reason why they don't like talk to you or offer you like interview. So I mean, while I was talking to this recruiter, he looked at my GitHub, and at the time I was actually learning Angular. Actually, maybe 2 weeks ago, I was like, I'm actually currently learning Angular, and every time I learned something new, I push that up to GitHub, and it was really cool because like whenever I was talking to this recruiter, he was like, oh, I see you're learning Angular, and I'm just like, oh yeah, he actually saw that. And so it's really smart to have an active GitHub, honestly.
I mean, that LinkedIn
live
portfolio, like I said, portfolio is going to be what gets you into a lot of people's doors, especially if you have a weak or no degree, weak degree like me or no degree.
Yeah, exactly.
I've interviewed with a few higher up companies. Most of the time I interview with them, I know I'm going in there like not actually as like the right person for the job, but I want to see if maybe they can make a position for me, because my current company actually made a position for me.
Okay.
Like, the position I applied for, I wasn't like able to work for it, but they liked me so much that they were like, yeah, we want you still, so we're gonna make a position for you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And sometimes companies do that. I wouldn't be hopeful for them to do that, but I've went on interviews to Highmark, PNC. Those would be like the main two big companies.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I went in knowing I'm not ready for the position, but just seeing kind of what happens, getting that experience of like a senior level developer like interview. And most of the time I make it through the entire interview process up until the very end. And that very end tells you what you need to know and like what you're failing on. Because like I know a few of my weak points were pointed out both at PNC and Highmark. And I managed to still go through 3 interviews at PNC, make it there.
Yeah.
Go through multiple interviews with Highmark, make it almost into the door, but they needed a senior developer. And they just called me back again recently, which they actually got back to me again today. They actually do want another senior developer, so I wasn't applicable to the role again. But yet they still called me. I was like, we really like you. We just can't make a position for you right now. This is a just random tangent here. I actually interviewed with Giant Eagle a long time ago for like a mid-level role, and I had decided I did not want the position.
What was the role? Or
It's a mid-level Angular position.
okay.
And I don't want to say on cam why I didn't want the position, but there's a few issues I had with their culture.
Mm-hmm.
But I literally just pretty much fucked around the entire first interview, and they pretty much offered me the job without a second interview. Like, literally a phone interview. Okay, this will give you a good picture. This legitimately happened. They asked me where I like to eat, where I buy my groceries at. I said, I don't really shop for groceries. They're like, oh, what do you do for food? I was like, I normally go to gas stations or, whatever's around me.
Oh.
And they're like, okay, how do you survive? I'm like, I mostly survive off of caffeine, and hatred. I legitimately said that to them, and they were just like, and I just kept dropping lame dad jokes the entire
See,
interview.
that's the thing. Like with some people, like with some people you talk to, you can't always crack a joke because sometimes
she wasn't amused at all.
Oh, okay, it was
she just like you could tell in her voice she was like, please just let this be over. But I imagine there is probably someone listening on the other end whenever it came to like the technical questions. They're probably relaying them to her, and I answered them. I guess I had to answer them all spot on because like I said, I got the call back the next day like, we actually want to hire you like really badly. So I imagine, this is how I imagine the scenario going. You have this recruiter lady from the company performing the interview for the developers. They're listening to it on another line, but they don't feel like participating. For whatever reason. And they're just listening to this poor recruiter go through non-stop dad jokes and just all the most terrible punny jokes you could imagine. And you just know like some senior developer in the background like, oh my god, laughing his ass off at her.
So I forgot one part of the story about that worst interview ever. I was actually trying to make the guy laugh, right? So he asked me if I worked on any side projects. And I was like, yeah, I'm trying to recreate this app that I saw in Silicon Valley. It's basically an app that tells you whether something is a hot dog or not a hot dog. And he's like, oh, cool. And then he asked me another question. I'm like, fuck, dude. He didn't laugh at that at all. I thought he was going to friggin' fall on the floor and start laughing, but he was just like...
To note, he's used the app on me. I am not a hot dog.
You know what? That app, like, it's pretty legit. Like, you'll take a picture of things that aren't hot dogs, and they'll tell you that they're not hot dogs. Legitly.
Do you think that's a good place to wrap this video on? Hot dog apps?
Yeah, we can wrap it on that. I mean, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, maybe next video I'll take a picture of a hot dog, and I'll see where it takes me from there. But yeah,
Thank you for tuning in, everybody. This is Goober and Andy. I hope you enjoyed listening to his experience. If you have a similar experience, let us know, especially if you're dropping funny dad jokes or literally telling the interviewer you'll survive off of hatred and caffeine.
Also,
we'll love these stories.
Yeah, definitely comment, like, subscribe, and if you have your own, like, bad interview story or even a good interview story, just feel free to leave a comment about it. We'll probably read it, probably talk about it next video we post.
Oh yeah, we definitely will.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Love hearing that stuff. So yeah, I think that's about it, right?
Awesome. Have a good one, guys.
See you later.